just give a couple more minutes to wait for people to join us. Okay, everyone. So I think we are going to start right now. Good morning. Welcome to the session on AI, small business, entrepreneurship, and public policy. I don't know if you had a chance to hear me out on Monday on another session, but if you haven't, I will introduce myself again. I'm Helena Martins. I'm originally Brazilian, but now I'm based in Madrid. And I've had the privilege to have been working at Google for 15 years on the public policy team. I recently transitioned from a regional role that I was working before, leading public policy for Portugal, to now working on the knowledge information products on the public policy team as well. Really happy to be here with you, and let me introduce you to Chris Turner, who is sitting right next to me. He's the Vice President for Knowledge and Information Products in the Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google. He leads the global team that is responsible for setting up policy strategies in support of products such as Google Search, Google Maps, and Google Ads. And he also happens to be my boss and my vice president. So what we thought of doing today is kind of like a fireside chat. I have a few questions that I would like to ask Chris. And then on the second half of the session, we would open up for questions. Does that sound okay for everyone? Wonderful. So, Chris, maybe just to set the stage a little bit, when we were thinking on which topic to bring to this session, I think it immediately became quite clear to us that we needed to talk about the intersection between AI and public policies, specifically to this audience, because in our perspective, we really believe that AI can have a really transformational role for entrepreneurship in Latin America. And also, I think you all are very well positioned to help shape some of the public policies in the region that can help unlock some of these opportunities. But one of the things that I shared in the session on Monday is that although AI is on the forefront of the public discourse right now, it's not a new concept. And I wanted to ask you, Chris, if you could share with us, just to kickstart the conversation, a little bit of the background and how Google has been thinking and working with AI to set the stage.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And good morning, all y'all. Buenos dias. Thank you. I like the call and the response. We want to interact with each other, right? Yeah, so to answer your question, I think you have to start with Google's mission. Everything at the company, I've been at the company 3 years, everything at this company starts and stops with the mission, right? And that is to make the world's information universally accessible and useful, right? That's the privilege and the weight that everyone that works at Google carries around with them, because that mission is like massive, right? Like when you think about the scope of what the company's trying to pull off, that's a lot. It's a lot. But I start with that because that's the context in which you need to view how Google uses, implements, introduces, and rolls out artificial intelligence products, right? It's with the idea that it's taking the world's information, making it universally accessible, everybody can access it, and useful. So it's not a data dump of stuff, it's stuff you can action, you can do something with it, right? So that's how we think about artificial intelligence. The funny bit is that right now we're in like a heat wave of AI, but you've probably been using artificial intelligence on Google's products and others for a minute, right? If you've ever started typing an email and the email starts suggesting what the end of it might be, what the next word might be, that's artificial intelligence. If you've entered in a route on Google Maps, which is also one of the things in our portfolio, and it gave you two routes or three routes, and one of them, depending on the part of the world you're in, might have a little leaf on it that says if you take this route, you're going to save more on gasoline and have less emissions. That is all generative AI, all generative artificial intelligence. So you've used and experienced the technology for a while. In 2016, our CEO said we're an AI first company, and that's really when we started introducing all of these technologies into our consumer facing products that y'all have been using. But what's different about this moment, right? It's the more direct way in which you're interacting with the artificial intelligence, primarily the chatbot optionality that we haven't experienced before, right? So that's the big wave of what's going on now in the public facing area. We'll talk about B2B, behind the scenes stuff that's more relevant to entrepreneurs, but the thing driving the wave right now is how you're interacting with chatbots, and that's actually super useful. It's a way where regular folk, including me, can get AI to do what we want it to do, right? That's a way to think about this wave, right? You don't have to be a graduate degree level AI engineer or scientist to get artificial intelligence to do what you want it to do. That's the new thing that's a part of this wave. And it is awesome and amazing with its opportunities to be a transformative technology tool. I used a lot of adjectives there, but the word I ended with was what? Tool. Tool. All of this is a tool, right? It can help you do the things you want to do more efficiently. And when we start talking about the risks associated, it can help the bad people, the bad guys, do bad things more efficiently too. So that's the approach you kind of have to take to this technology, right? But in more specifically thinking about it, I name checked like a lot of the day-to-day things just to give you context on how you're using it right now. There are other things that governments, cities, and counties are using. You know, you can use it to predict when a pothole is going to show up, so you can proactively do maintenance. You can figure out if you've got lead pipes and predict which ones might be lead pipes so you can replace the pipes. You can predict when a student is at risk of dropping out of school so you can have an intervention before the kid drops out. You can, moving up the scale, you can predict how a wildfire is going to spread. You can predict when a river is going to flood, and you can predict down to the house which houses will be impacted when the river floods, right? So tools. All of these are different tools that are sort of driving to make your individual life or your community's life better. And then you go all the way up to the big end, which are things like AlphaFold, where we did the work of like 400 million years of scientific research in the shape of proteins. The shape of a protein is what helps you do things like develop treatments for liver cancer, right? But you have to have the shape right, and it takes a very long time for humans to fold it. The AlphaFold project, driven by generative AI, did all of that work 400 million years in a couple of weeks, right? And right now, there is a treatment for liver cancer under review as a result of the work that was done on AlphaFold, right? So all the way from fixing potholes up to cancer treatments, right? Like that's the range and scope of what this tool can do. And that's the way you as an entrepreneur, as a startup, as a government leader, as someone from a big company ought to be thinking about it, right? What do you want this tool to do that's already on your plan of things you're doing and make it better? What don't you want the tool to do? Starting with the list of things you already don't like, right? That's the baseline, easiest way to think about it. Those concepts we've built into our AI design principles, by the way. If anyone's interested in those as a starting point, I can direct you to the website and all that sort of stuff. But we have a list of here's what we will do when we're building artificial and deploying artificial intelligence. Here's a list of things we won't do, right? So it's one of the will do's is first question, is this going to be society beneficial, right? Going back to our mission statement, right? One of the first things we ask. Are we going to be able to do test and safety against this thing when we do it? Then there's things we don't do. We don't build things without humans in the loop, right? Like a human needs to touch whatever inputs, outputs, human needs to do it, doesn't do it all on its own, right? So those are the sorts of things that we've got. If that is of interest to anyone in the room that's like building AI or incorporating AI, hit me on the side and I can walk you through sort of how we develop those and whether or not they're like applicable to your startup, and we can riff on how that works. That was a long answer. Sorry.
Amazing way to start. I think you set the perfect stage for, and very nicely connects with my next question.
It's amazing how that happens. It's like I got a
we
piece of
haven't
paper
planned. We haven't
knowing
planned
what the questions are.
We haven't planned this at all. It's always spontaneous. It's very jazzy. What I was gonna say is that you started saying what our mission is, which, if I would summarize, is basically making technology helpful for everyone and democratizing technology. Thinking of that, specifically when it comes to AI, I would love you could share with this audience some of the ways that we are connecting AI in our efforts and our products with the small businesses and entrepreneurs, maybe with some examples.
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of interesting examples. In our cloud products, we've got a product called Duet AI, where as your folk might be coding, it will code along with you, right? So as you're doing it, it'll say, oh, you might want to try this. If this is what you were trying to achieve, you might want to change these 3 lines, right? So it's going back and forth with you as you're developing the code to get it right or closer to right on the first time, right? It's like you've got a buddy that's riffing with you back and forth, right? So that's one place where you could find it really interesting. More generally, most businesses, especially startups and small businesses, but really everyone, as you're going to drive demand, you're using some sort of marketing play, right? Like you're trying to reach customers, attract customers via your brand, via your marketing strategy, via advertising. There is a big gap between what your biggest competitors can do and what you and your crew of the 10 willing can do, right, to keep up. AI can close that gap, so you can now use artificial intelligence through products we've deployed to go back through and help you with keywords, headlines, etc. But you can also do it with your creative, right? So you can use artificial intelligence to differentiate and vary your creative. So the look and feel of your creatives looks and feels competitive with the biggest companies that have like 5,000 people all focused on nothing but how their creatives show up online, right? AI like wipes that gap, that delta off the table, right? Which is pretty awesome. So I think those are two of the ones that are like super relevant. If there are nonprofits in the room, there's some other cool stuff that we've done with the Gina Davis Institute. Gina Davis, back in I want to say the early aughts, '07 or '08, the actress, for those that don't recognize the name, Gina Davis, the actress, was very concerned with the lack of diversity on TV and in movies. So she started the Institute to try and drive greater transparency in the sort of lack of representation, and then use that to drive policy, to drive Hollywood, et cetera, to increase diversity. The way she started doing that was having a staff of researchers basically watch every movie and TV show that came out and try and like document like what they were seeing across all of that, right? Like that's a lot a lot of like repetitive work. AI, right? Like AI can go through what would have taken like 44 years and do it in like a day, right? And just go through, and because human always in the loop, it goes through and it says, all right, here's the stuff that we are very sure had what you're looking for. Here it all is indexed if you can go back and look at it. Here are all the places that we thought were interesting or had questions. You really ought to go through and take a look at these places. So now the researchers are spending their time on like the most interesting or difficult bits, as opposed to like watching the Simpsons over and over again, doing checks in a box A or box B or box C, right? AI did the box checks, said I wasn't sure about these boxes. This box looks really interesting for whatever it is you're looking for, right? So that's another way, if you're in a nonprofit space, where there are technology tools that are actually applicable to the stuff you're working on too. And there's like, again, hit me up afterwards, whatever field you're in, I can riff back and forth. Like I got like 100 of these different use cases in my head, and probably another 1,000 on pieces of paper somewhere. So I'm sure I could find something that could hook y'all up and be useful.
And I think one of the things that we've also dedicated a lot of resources is on literacy. Yeah. Because we obviously understand that in order for small businesses, entrepreneurs to really take advantage of these tools, they need to know about it. So we have developed a few programs. I don't know if you want to mention some of them.
Please.
I was just going to mention a couple of them. You might have heard about this before, but we have a global program called Google for Startups. And they have several different projects that support founders, that support startups in many ways. But one of the recent programs that they have launched is really focused on AI, and it's called the AI Academy. It's a global project, so if your startup is focusing on AI, you can apply and be part of this AI Academy. So this is one way, Google for Startups, AI Academy. The other way is via, it's a professional certificate actually. So if you have employees, for instance, that want to become AI experts, we also offer a very great course. I've taken it myself actually, called AI Essentials. And it's given on the Coursera platform. I don't know if you're familiar with Coursera. Within AI Essentials, we also have other professional certificates on cybersecurity, UX, project management, so forth and so on. But I really recommend, if you really want to understand the potential of AI for your companies and your businesses, I think it's a really good way to start with the AI Essentials program. And in addition...
¿Cuánto cuesta?
Huh?
How much does it cost?
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I think there are grants that we provide, scholarships that we provide in several parts of the world. So do look up for that. Thanks for reminding me. And there's another free program as well, which is called AI Literacy Roadshow. I think actually the name can vary from region to region, but basically we do partnerships with local organizations where we do shorter courses, because the AI Essentials take some time. It's 40 hours course, if I'm not mistaken. But these courses are like 1 or 2 hours long, and it's basically to provide a very high-level overview of how you can use AI to boost productivity for marketing, so forth and so on. And yes, it's done with local partners. But if you go to Grow with Google, if you search for Grow with Google, you can find more information on where you can find these courses in your region or city. So moving on to my next question. So the title of this session is AI, Startups, Entrepreneurship, and Public Policy. So we talked a little bit about the three first topics, but we haven't touched upon the topic of public policy. And I just wanted to hear from you, Chris, in these recent years, I know we've been talking a lot within Google, that AI is too important not to regulate, but that we need to come up with regulations that are both supporting innovation, but also addressing risks that need to be addressed. So I don't know if maybe you can share with us a little bit both on how public policies can help us unlock the opportunities and really help transform the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but also how we can, through public policies, support innovation and while mitigating risks.
Yeah, I think the tagline to take away is AI is too important not to regulate, and too important not to regulate well, right? And really, I would say I sort of teed part of this conversation up at the top, right? The way to think about how you want public policy on top of artificial intelligence is the outcome, right? You want all the good stuff that you want to be able to use it for it, do those things better, achieve your ends and goals better, faster. All of the stuff you don't like and you don't want, the bad people, you want to stop that from happening, right? So it's the outcomes that you want. And it goes back to this thing being a tool, right? If you want to regulate how matchsticks are manufactured, or you want to regulate the size and weight and length of a baseball bat, right? You don't regulate the forest, you regulate the production of the baseball bat or the matches, right? To regulate the forest means you are regulating everything else that you wanted to do with wood for the sake of preserving the length, width, and weight of the baseball bat, right? That is the conundrum that every country is facing. And it doesn't face just baseball players. It faces every startup that's based in that country. So the decision points that your governments are making are going to impact how you can incorporate artificial intelligence into your products. And it's not just the startups, right? If you think about the auto industry, how Europe decides to regulate artificial intelligence versus how Japan decides to regulate it is going to impact the ability of Mercedes-Benz and Renault to compete with Toyota, right? And it's not going to be an incremental difference. This technology tool will create exponential differences between the folks that can figure out how they want to use it early and the folks that are not allowed to use it, or the folks that are not allowed to use it for several years before it reaches whatever stage of like approval to go into the forest, right? That's what's playing out in geopolitics right now, and that's a big banner, but it's very critical for each of you because it affects each of you that are in startups, nonprofits, small businesses specifically, and again, big businesses too, how you're going to remain competitive and the things that you're going to be able to do. So I go around the world talking to startups in particular to try and hear what they're doing. And it's interesting that the focus on regulation or the thoughts around regulation tend to be on AI companies, companies that are developing foundational models, that they're selling artificial intelligence to other companies, right? A B2B play. But the reality is, again, baseball bat or matchstick versus forest, it's a horizontal problem. It's a horizontal challenge. So it's the online retailer. It's the startup that is trying. I was speaking with a startup yesterday, I think from Chile, that's trying to use artificial intelligence to prevent birds from flying into wind turbines. Right, like. That is ostensibly a company that is in the an energy B2B company, not an artificial intelligence company. But if you regulate in a way that hits everyone, now that person is now done, right? Or has to relocate their business to one of the more competitive artificial intelligence markets, right? Like those are the bits that folks in the room should really pay attention to, like hone in on the how, right? Baseball bat and matches or the forest. That is the simplest way to think about how you ought to approach regulation and be thinking about it, right? And if anyone in the room is from a government, I think that goes doubly for y'all, right? Like if you go after the forest, all of those companies that I just named that are in your constituencies, your employers, whether it's auto or energy or agriculture or tourism, every single industry is going to need to learn how to integrate artificial intelligence as a tool into their workflows, right? So governments have the ability to help encourage, accelerate that, giving those companies an advantage, or the ability to halt that, giving those companies competitors advantages in other markets, right? That's how you ought to think about it. That said, there is still the responsibility bit, right? So I'm not saying you don't regulate anything, right? That's not at all what I'm saying. Think about what you want the baseball bat to look like, right? What weight, length, size do you want it? What do you want it used for, right? That's where you focus. If you're worried about fraud, right, or financial fraud, and artificial intelligence being used to accelerate financial fraud, go after that, right? Like this is one of the things that we want to stop from happening, right? Rinse and repeat with the starting point is every existing law, criminal or otherwise, that you've got on your books right now as a government. Think about how artificial intelligence would play a role in those and start blocking them out, right? That's the process to go through versus, again, trying to block out the entire forest and lose all of the benefits. And the benefits, I referenced it earlier, but the benefits go to governments too, right? There are lots of governments that are working on how they incorporate AI to more efficiently deliver government services, knowing that they don't have the ability to hire more government employees. Like that's not a thing for a lot of countries in the world. So how do you get better and more efficient at delivering services, knowing that you can't hire more folks, right? The way you do it is you make the folks that you've got working with you more effective and more efficient in delivering services. So there's places in the United States, for example, in Florida, where they have over a year-long backlog on construction permits, right? And I'm not talking about 100-floor, skyscrapers. I'm talking about the family that wants to build an extend the porch in their backyard, right? Year-long backlog to get someone to approve what is going to get approved, right? They're like adding 2 feet on the back of your porch in Florida is going to get approved, right? It's very rarely not going to get approved. But you have to have a person right now that has the time to go through and say, yep, approved, yep, approved. And there's no capacity within their system to have more people go through and do those approvals. So just like the Gina Davis Institute example, the government is thinking, hey, can I get AI to go through and say, all right, if it looks like this, you want to add a foot on your porch? Cool, approve, 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 approve. You want to build a SpaceX launch pad in your backyard? Yeah, that's not approved. Done. And then here's all the middle, right? Here are the middle cases where we need a human to take a look and make a judgment call, because we don't want the system making judgment calls. We want the system doing the 100% and the 0%. But that narrows the funnel enough for the government to be able to go through and just focus on those middle cases. And in doing so, one, your citizens are a lot happier because they didn't have to wait a year to get their deck approved. But two, the other interesting bit is in many countries around the world, that process comes with taxes, increased property tax, the filing taxes. So now the government is getting more revenue off of the approval processes as well, right? So what you don't want to do as a government is eliminate your ability to do those sorts of things if that's an issue, right? If efficiency and service is an issue, you don't want to eliminate your ability to incorporate artificial intelligence to do that work.
I think you touched upon two topics that maybe I would summarize as investment in, again, in literacy. In the example that you gave of the government, governments want to be able to empower their employees to use these tools to really speed up processes that could take
for the
forever.
Again, I do this I go around the world with having this. I have never had a conversation with a government where they said, yeah, I can't wait to use this to start laying people off. Right. Every conversation has been, I've got way more work right now than any of my people can handle. And they are doing the most rote, mundane work over and over and over again just to find the 10 that actually require their skill set. Get all the rest of that stuff out so I can have my current folk spend their time on the 10, because even that is more than enough work, right? That is literally the conversations I've had with municipal, prefecture, provincial, local governments in like 6 different countries in the past 9 months.
I think that's super interesting because I believe very much that this also applies to entrepreneurs. And specifically talking about small businesses. If you want to compete in a market where, for instance, let's say, there are big, well-established companies, AI can really level the playing field here. Things that might require 10, 20 people to do with AI, maybe that's not needed. Maybe it's something that you can already go to market without that need of so many people working on something. Maybe when you scale up, you'll need to hire more people, but at least as a kickstart, AI can be really powerful to boost and put you in a better situation in the market vis-a-vis other companies. And another thing that I think you mentioned, Chris, it's also the role that governments have in maybe I'm reading into you, but I will share my interpretation. It's also establishing the framework and infrastructure for AI to be adopted not only by governments, but also by different sectors. You mentioned the automotive sector. You mentioned, when you were talking about AlphaFold, you mentioned health sector. And I think a lot of times, the way the government approach a technology is to try to regulate a technology instead of looking, as you said, at specific sectors. And first of all, understanding how this technology can help support that specific sector. And then with that, focus exactly on, okay, we already have the regulation A, B, C. Where are the gaps within this regulation that do not address risks coming from AI? And how can we adjust the legislation so we can address some of these concerns? So I think, I don't know, just to summarize a little bit some of the things that you shared.
100%. That is the low-hanging fruit that every government should be looking at, right? Like, that's the stuff that you can make moves on right now, and you can do it in ways that drive your startup ecosystem. You can do it in ways that if ag is your big thing, tourism is your big thing, you can actually incent those places to go hard on it, so you beat other markets around the world to getting it right? Because it's not it's not, again, it's the vertical versus horizontal thing, right? Governments need to think about, I already have an ag industry that's thriving, or a transportation industry that's thriving, or a tourism industry that's thriving. How do I make sure they take it to the next level using this technology tool, right? Like that's the part of the thought process that you want to go through, right? How do I make sure that the workforce that's feeding into those industries is ready and capable of adopting and using artificial intelligence and are comfortable with it, right? I think we're going to get, I'm skipping around here on the script, so apologies. She's going to yell at me later. But the one of the magical bits about that interface that I talked about at the beginning, it's that it changes the skill set required to use the technology, right? So if any of y'all have played with this technology before, it's not that you're sitting down coding, right? You're asking very specific questions in your native language to try and get it to come back with what you want, right? Think about the workforce that's going to be using that. The skill is a language skill now, right? It's your mastery of your native language and your ability to use it to get the AI to do what you want. That's the skill, right? That is a very different skill, a different land than kind of coding land was, right? In my opinion, it is a more accessible place where you can play, where folks at different education levels, can play, right? Because it's about your mastery of language and your ability to use it to interact versus a more esoteric skill, which is coding, right? So in my opinion, this is opening the door for a lot of communities in the United States, in Latin America, and elsewhere to have a more robust workforce involved in artificial intelligence, particularly in its application side, than was possible when we were in like the massive, everyone needs to learn to code, right? Like that everyone needs to learn how to interact with AI is accessible, y'all. It's accessible, which is great. But governments, educators, and others need to be intentional about learning how to do that. So that's the introductory courses that you laid out, and then going up to the next levels on it, right? Like that's the skill set that drives all of this. And again, because it's a horizontal, it applies to every industry. Whatever your industry is in your country, whatever those big things are, it applies to it. It applies to it. No brainer to start encouraging that sort of training and skill set, because whatever it is, they're going to need it, right? Please.
I think we need the microphone though because we are recording. I don't know if someone can bring the microphone to her, please.
Who is, sorry?
Right there.
So, quick question about that as we're going through it. So, I run a startup accelerator in Virginia, and we're looking at a lot of AI companies, and there's this really weird, like, moral divide when it comes to the AI side of like, oh, college students are using AI to write their papers and all this other stuff. So everyone's getting mad at AI helping us in this way. When in reality, when I see it, those students are increasing in critical thinking because they're having to learn how to set parameters to get the AI to do what it's supposed to be doing. And so how are you working through the education of getting people to understand how that AI is a tool and it's not a moral dilemma? It's actually helping those college students and other students increase in their understanding of those concepts.
Yeah, we in the States in particular, and in other places, I believe in Brazil and a couple of other places, we actually have programs where we are working both on sort of the AI as a tool for educators, as well as sort of more of the broader online safety, social media bit. So we're working both of those things, saying, hey, social media seatbelt campaign, right? Like, you got to have hygiene when you're on social media. And hey, the thing of the future, maybe not social media, might actually be your ability to interact with artificial intelligence and to use it as a companion and a learning tool for your ideas. And the faster you can figure out how to do that, including on academic paper, whatever it is, it's like, it's not writing the paper for you. Again, human always has to be in the loop on this stuff. It's helping you iterate, and it's helping your creative thought process. And I think we heard it yesterday on the stage. That's how musicians are using it, right? It's like, how quickly can I get the idea in my head, out of my head, so I can hear it back and react to it and say, yeah, you know what? I really don't like that part. Sounded better in my head. Maybe I'll pivot and do this thing. Or I didn't even think about setting it that way. Let me go explore some of this more and figure out more about how it works. It's the same thing as you are learning in the learning process, and it ends up applying to the workforce. So we are working, not just us. All of these things, you should assume that there are some other companies doing it as well. We're just the coolest. But yes, that's exactly one of the things that we're working on at the K through 12 level.
Can I just add something? Because I think, obviously, as Chris said, and we've been sharing, there are many things that we are doing as a company. But I think this is actually a societal challenge. And I think, and this is actually a provocation that I would share with you, I think everyone here should be engaged in these conversations with governments as well, and with other organizations, with universities, with companies, because I think it's really a societal effort to ensure that people, one, understand the technology, that we, how can I say, explain, especially to generations that maybe are not as tech as the new generations are, that look, these are transitions that we are going to go through, and here's how this technology can help you in your daily life and things like that. And in addition to that, public policies. I do believe that governments should really think not only about regulating AI, but also, again, how can we embed AI literacy in our schools? How can we embed in our universities? How can that be part of a more holistic thinking in our societies? But here again, I believe that everyone here should, in my opinion, have a role to play in these discussions.
And use conferences like this to exchange notes, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to hear, if you talk to a startup from Spain versus a startup from Brazil versus a startup from Japan, you're going to hear very different stories, vibes, and experiences of how AI is being used in that ecosystem, how that ecosystem is playing with governments, with educators, et cetera. So there are definite best practices that you can hear, or at least the list of things not to do that you'll be able to gather by doing that comparison bit, because there's lots of countries that are taking different approaches to this. So talking to each other about those things and then bringing that back to your educators, your government, your startup ecosystem is also super, super useful. And that's another thing, again, hit me on the side. I'm happy to help with that stuff too.
Maybe, given that you already asked a question, we can open up for more questions right now if we have some. Otherwise, I have some other things that I can talk and ask Chris about. Yes, here.
Hi, I work in Henrico County, right outside of Richmond, Virginia,
Yep.
actually where she is as well, supporting
I used to
businesses.
live in Midlothian for a minute.
Oh, hey, all right. Supporting businesses that are growing. A lot of my attention now is focused more on small business, and it's a large task. Traditionally, I helped large warehouses, manufacturers find real estate and all of that. And so I'm wondering, you talked about some of the tools that are available, but can you give some practical examples of how local governments have kind of tapped into AI? And really my challenge is, how can I better get these small businesses to use AI to grow more, to access their resources, to be more efficient? I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the short answer is, when I'm not on planes, trains, and automobiles, I'm right up the road. And I got people still down there. I still got some people, so I can stop by and say what's up to whoever you want me to talk to. The longer answer is, one of the most innovative places I've seen using it in the States is the city of Dearborn, Michigan. So I'll hook you up with some of the examples of how they're doing it, but they were working on a very particular problem where they've got a challenge. It is not a problem. It is a challenge, and a good challenge, I think. They've got a very diverse community of lots of different languages spoken, and they're trying to figure out how to make everyone comfortable interacting with the government, right? So if there's particular information you need to share with law enforcement, or if you need to get your deck extended, but you don't feel like you can use the forms, you still want to be able to like get the deck done. So they're working on artificial intelligence to be able to do that sort of language translation bits on very technical documents that before, maybe they had one interpreter that was coming in like every other week and the line was out the door every time the interpreter showed up, never finished it. So now they're trying to, again, take the 100% and 0% off the table, where it's like the deck form is the deck form is the deck form, right? If you've got a law enforcement thing, then maybe we can get the essence of it to find out if it's like law enforcement or it's EMS or it's someone else, and then we can get so we know where to sort you before you get to the human. So there's a bunch of other stuff Dearborn is doing, but I think right now, from what I've seen, they're best in class. There are some other one-offs where I think the pothole example is from Memphis. The lead pipes example is from another community in Michigan, but I'll have to get that for you. And the predicting dropouts is at the college level in New York, and I can hook you up with that as well. We've also globally, there are a lot of communities that are using something that we came up with called Project Greenlight, where you can increase the efficiency at your intersections by changing the timing of the lighting signals without having to go out and buy like new lights, new technology, right? And the benefit of that is, one, decreases the traffic in the intersection, right? That's the obvious one. But also it turns out that the longer a car, some of the biggest emissions from autos are cars idling at stoplights. So if you can fix parts of that, you can, within a city, make incremental decreases in your greenhouse gas emissions and make your people happy because they're not sitting in traffic all the time, right? So those are a couple of examples.
More questions? Right. Here first, or let's see where he's gonna go. Okay, here.
Hello, thank you for the insights. I'm Natalia from Ecuador, and I work with a network that supports entrepreneurs in the country, in different parts of the country. And two of the main challenges that when we talked with the entrepreneurs is why they are not using these technological tools. And first of all, it's because they don't have all the knowledge on how to use them, so they are a bit afraid to risk too much on how they can start doing this adoption. So I think that's something that we can work on, because it's very important to start helping them with the adoption process, because the time is really flying, and maybe not only in Ecuador but in other countries in the region could be the same challenge. So I'm up for to get together for these programs that you already have. And the other thing that I wanted to share is that we also work with companies who support the entrepreneurs and the government to help also to massify all the different programs that we do. So there is a concern about the risk and how it's going to be used if we start adding AI in everything we do. Mm-hmm. So we want to start a conversation in the country about the risk and also the good and the bad part, let's say, so everyone is aware of this information. So do you have also, I don't know, in the work that you do, this kind of either workshops or strategies to help these countries to understand the do's and don'ts, and even for policymakers to, when they create these new frameworks, so they don't block everything that it's coming. So I don't know if you have strategies to work together on that.
We do, and we're happy to speak with you and anyone else afterwards. We've got workshops and things like that. And we also have like lots of best practices, right? So a combination of workshops that can help focus on the outcomes that you want instead of this thing is scary, so let's block the entire forest. Like we've got that sort of material. And we've got sort of the best practices. So we can say, okay, Japan is doing something that's working really well. Here's how that's going. Here's what Brazil is thinking about doing. Here's what the US is doing, Spain, Brussels, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the combination of those two things might help get folks more comfortable with the fact that, again, it's a tool. It's a revolutionary tool, but it's a tool. It's not the Terminator.
Right here, please.
Thank you. Luca Iandoli, I'm an educator at St. John's University. I'm very intrigued about this application you mentioned a couple of times about using AI to predict dropout rate. For my university, it's very important because as a mission-driven university, we serve a fair share of students who are considered at risk just because they are less affluent and they like first generation children of immigrants. So that's this consistent population of students who might drop out for typically financial reason or lack of support scaffolding system in their own family or communities. So can you tell us more? And the question I have specifically is this system, first of all, is something that everybody can use, or is more of a proprietary thing that one particular university you're working with is using? And number two, is the system more like based on, because I've heard of some systems using predictors, like, financial condition and things like that, where as opposed to other systems who might help you, okay, whatever are the predictors, we can help the students to thrive if we package their training or their, especially at the beginning, their pathway in the university system in the right way. So that they can overcome whatever gap. So more of an achievement type of.
Yeah, it's more of the latter. To the second question first, it's more of the latter than the former. There's a prediction element in it, obviously, because that sets up like the intervention, but it's prediction and intervention, not just prediction. And it is being piloted, and I'll come back to you on this because I can't remember if it's the CUNY system in New York or the SUNY system in New York. I consistently switch those two up. But I'll come back to you with exactly which group it is, and then we can put you in touch with them. I don't believe it is a proprietary Google thing. It's a thing that Google's research teams are doing in collaboration with the university with the idea that it scales from there. Yeah.
Aaron Wiggum from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Was in higher ed for a while. Now I'm in human development. And my question is around the generational rollout of this AI technology.
Yep.
How much energy or how much emphasis is put on the baby boomer and how they adopt, the adoption rate of that group versus whatever this new generation is,
Yep.
the 20-somethings now, right?
Yep.
How do you gauge the success and the adoption rate of those both of those? Yep. And then is there an emphasis globally, I guess, since Google is Google, on that from one region versus the other?
Yes, that's a very insightful question. The answer is looking at adoption from Gen Alpha, I guess, all the way up to the boomers generation, right? So the whole spectrum. And some of it is regional in where we're testing and trying to like move the needle. So in Japan, as many folks know, there is an aging cliff that arguably the country has already fallen off of, where the aging population is significantly larger. The boomer population is significantly larger and entering into retirement. And the millennials and Gen Zs are nowhere near the size to be able to replace the boomers in the workforce. So that's a big challenge in Japan. So part of the way Japan and several sort of prefectures that I've been governors at prefecture level are thinking about artificial intelligence is more that, right? It's how can, one, we use the technology as a tool to keep our productivity at the same level as folks start to enter retirement age, but two, with a retirement population that is that large, how can we keep them engaged and active online and in the digital space, where Japan has always been an early adopter. So it's focusing there. We're working on a program called Super Searchers, where using AI, using Google search, et cetera, helps that population keep connected to their family, to their community, to their culture, et cetera. And again, the idea is if it works there where the cliff is that big, the delta is that big, you can take it and do it in other places that are facing similar situations in Europe, the United States, here in Puerto Rico, et cetera. So thank you for the question, but that's exactly how we're approaching it.
Hello, name's Jonathan from Puerto Rico. So I'm a developer, and I use GitHub Copilot, and I use ChatGPT. I use everything.
All of it.
Awesome.
Any Google
As you
tools?
should, as
Any
you
Google-
should.
Any Google?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. I experiment with a lot of them. I'm sorry here, but
That's okay,
my
that's
point being is, so I dedicate myself to helping small business owners like go through digital transformation, digital literacy. Because in Puerto Rico, we have a lot, like a lot of parts in the world, like people are afraid of tech in general. Like it's not that they don't have the capability of using it. It's more like they're afraid, right?
Right.
I guess my question is, can you give me an example of places, since you've traveled around the world, where what's the biggest hurdle, like trying to make people use it, and what a project that's currently going on where you're helping small business owners or newcomers, or making people's skills, skill ups or whatever, skills level up. Like what a good project that we could follow a study, so like we could apply best practices.
Yeah, there are a couple here too that I can think of, but first I'll start with a bit of a framing. I am seeing, and this is more of anecdotal based on my travels, not any sort of data set that I've seen. Anecdotally, I'm seeing startups behave differently towards artificial intelligence than I am small businesses, right? And that distinction are startups looking to grow exponentially, big new ideas, that sort of thing, versus someone that's looking to incrementally grow, stay within sort of what they've developed, right? So two different buckets. In the small business bucket, some of the things that we've seen work, it's taking the existing things they're already comfortable with and showing them how any new technology tool incrementally improves the value of that widget versus showing up with a brand new fresh tool, right? So part of the way we did it on the ad side was, sir, you're a small business that's been using ads, our existing advertising technology to sell your bespoke luggage for the past 6 years, right? You're not a technology company, you don't have a CTO, it's like 12 of y'all, right? This is may or may not be an actual case. But even with that, because you're already familiar with the advertising tool that you're using to design your creative already, it's the addition of the new bit inside of a tool you're comfortable with. So you're only learning how to use this new bit, and the user interface of it feels very similar, if not identical, to what you were already using, right? And then you can each increment get a little bit further down the road. That's what I've seen work, and that's a use case where I've seen it work on the small business side. On the startup side, very different story. It's all been eagerness, and the thing there has been cautions about, I don't know if I'm even supposed to say this, cautions about AI for AI's sake, right? Like AI, just because everyone keeps saying it, like you have to think about how you're going to use it to achieve your existing business end faster, right? It's not, oh shit, I gotta grab AI, plug it into something, right? That will not work. That will not work. Take your existing goal, your existing missions, your existing annual plan, and work backwards from there to see how AI can help you hit your number faster, can help you do your marketing better, right? Like that's the magic if you're in startup world, not just grabbing every shiny AI thing and trying to slam it into your business model.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, Eureka from Bermuda. And so this has been really, really fascinating because we are here, we're an agency that supports small and medium-sized businesses and startups in Bermuda, so we're kind of quasi-government. But we have been thinking about AI from the entrepreneur and user perspective and how they would use it. But you've got my juices flowing with regard to how can AI actually be deployed to remove barriers, right, that entrepreneurs hit in trying to either start up or scale within the ecosystem. So for instance, registering a business or getting a bank account or, all of these touch points that just add time and challenges to actually bringing something to market. Do you have examples of how an ecosystem has actually embraced it? Like even getting a bank account shouldn't be difficult, but in our country it is. So I'm just interested from that kind of back support perspective of how we actually support entrepreneurs.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I don't know that I flagged that my other hat, I'm on the board of Gen. And are there other, I see at least one other Gen board member here in the room with me. I would say that the best use case is Gen has already started working on how you can make your ecosystem more of a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs. So that blueprint, we can talk to you about sort of how that looks right now. But it's the same thing. The same thing I was saying with the startups, right? Like take that blueprint, and then underneath that say, okay, AI can actually do this part here, right? And in government world, usually what we see is that there are 15 different agencies you have to go to start up your business, and none of those agencies actually talk to each other at all. So the opportunity for artificial intelligence is to take those 15 agencies, streamline the application process to where even if you can't drive the culture change that's required to get 15 agencies to play with each other, at least on the user interface side, the entrepreneur side, you're filling out one document, and then AI can go through and sort to each of those 15 different agencies. And then once they're done, puts it all back together, sends one thing back out to the entrepreneur, so the entrepreneur doesn't have to figure out how to navigate the maze, because that's the maze. And this is a big country, small country, whatever, wherever you are in the spectrum of your entrepreneurial ecosystem, this ends up being a challenge, and it's a challenge that benefits incumbents and hurts startups. AI can help narrow that if you take the stuff that Jen has already done and figure out where AI can help you move faster. And maybe like the hardest bit of all of it tends to be the culture change required of the government. So maybe AI can help you be a bridge while you're working to get everyone to play nicely in the sandbox, right? Like AI can be the bridge, so on the outside it feels to the entrepreneur like everyone is playing nice, right?
So unfortunately, we have to finish, but maybe, Chris, if you could just share final thoughts with the audience, and then I would just thank you afterwards.
No, thanks all of y'all for coming out, for being engaged, the great questions. I mean it when I say hit me up. I got a pocket full of business cards, and I got WhatsApp and all that sort of stuff, because this wasn't meant to be me up here on stage talking. This was meant to like start a conversation. So as I'm going around the world, I'm learning from you, and I'm taking your stories with me and connecting you to the other interesting people I'm meeting to really drive that part of the ecosystem. Like I am committed to that both as a board member of Gen and as a Googler. So I would leave you with, when I say reach out, I actually mean it. Please do hit me up, start a conversation, and think about how you take and interact back home with your ecosystem and your governments based on this. Give me a shout if you want tips or tricks.
And for those who didn't get to ask questions, you can take Chris on that right now afterwards.
I was just going to put in a plug for the 1 o'clock session.
Okay.
AI in business.
All right.
A lot of questions here about practical implementation of AI in business. By all means, it's AI in business.
There you go.
Family office that I'm doing with another Gen board member, Rebecca Wang. So by all means, if you have those sorts of questions.
Did y'all hear that? 1 o'clock, more magic happens.
Exactly. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, y'all.